writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. We're your hosts. I'm Tara Kremen, Director of Kobo Writing Life.
And I'm Rachel Wharton, Author Engagement Manager at Kobo Writing Life.
This week, we're talking to Sarah Elisabeth Sawyer, who is an author and writing instructor. She has published 19 books, 11 of which wrote solely by dictation. And Sarah is also the host of the Confident Fiction Author podcast, which empowers authors to live their best creative lifestyle. As a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, her signature course, Fiction Writing American Indians, equips authors to write authentic stories that honor Native American history and culture.
Our conversation with Sarah was so insightful and included so much information, especially for authors who are looking to dabble in or master the art of dictation. She had some great advice on how to get started. She had some great advice for people like me who tend to ramble in their voice notes and are scared to approach dictation. And she also really delved into what she offers in her Fiction Writing American Indians course and how authors can approach writing Native American and Indigenous characters without falling into common pitfalls. So a lot of really valuable information here on two very different but very valuable topics, and we hope you enjoy.
Sarah Elisabeth Sawyer with us on the podcast this week. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you for having me, Tara and Rachel. I'm excited.
Nice. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing and also the work that you do with authors?
Absolutely. So I am Sarah Elisabeth Sawyer. I write primarily historical fiction, and that falls under some historical westerns. I have a historical western series, but I'm a tribal member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. So all of my main characters in my books are Native American. They are Choctaw. And then for my Doc Beck Western series, I feature an Omaha Indian woman doctor in the 1890s. So that's a little bit about my author life. I've written so I've indie published 18 books. That's all of those are indie published, those two series and some standalones that I have in there. And then I have one book that came out with Chickasaw Press. It's a small press. So Choctaw and Chickasaw, we're pretty close. So I do a lot of work with the Chickasaw Nation, and they published a book that I did, a nonfiction biography on a World War I hero. So I have a total of 19 books out, and just very grateful for that and continuing to write books. And then on the teaching side, I teach authors how to accurately and respectfully write Native American characters. So I have a course out on that. And then I primarily teach, though, authors how to dictate their fiction. So all authors being able to write by speaking their words instead of typing, and numerous health benefits to that, numerous, of course, speed. And I think we'll get into talking about that today. But that's a little bit about what I do.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into like the dictation and indie publishing of it all. But I'm just curious, like, how did you begin? Were you writing stories as a child? Like, what drove you to kind of find this career path as an author?
Yeah, I wrote my first story when I was 5. So not a complete story, but, not everything spelled right and everything. But I had a story about kindness that I wanted to share, and I was very shy. And so I knew I wouldn't be able to tell the story. And ironically, now I do some oral storytelling, but I was very shy and I knew I wouldn't be able to tell it. And the only way that I could get that story out would be to write it. So I wrote it. My mother gave me like a little stack of sticky notes, and I wrote one sentence on each one. And then my brother, who was 7 at the time, he illustrated it. So she saved that. I'm so grateful for that. It started early on, and then I continued writing throughout my teens, but I really struggled with finishing stories. And I think it was just the handwriting was very exhausting. And I learned to type in my teens on a little electric typewriter. So I got into that. And then in 2012, I was accepted into the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of the American Indian Artist and Leadership Program as a literary artist. And that resulted in me publishing my first book, Touch My Tears, Tales from the Trail of Tears. And I did that with 9 other authors. So the project was doing research. I spent 2 weeks in Washington, D.C. doing research and doing presentations and all, and then brought that back to my Choctaw community for a writing workshop. We had authors from 5 different states come. It was so fun. And I invited them to submit for that anthology. And so we were able to put that together. I had kind of thought the NMAI, the National Museum of the American Indian, might publish it because they do have a press, but I found out it was just for nonfiction books at that time. And so I was communicating with them, and they're like, honestly, a lot about publishing. you could do it yourself. You could put that out yourself. And that became, and I'd already been researching indie publishing, self-publishing for years before that. And that I was like, okay, let's tackle it. So what a project back whenever I was having to format the ebook with HTML and using Microsoft Word to do the formatting on the doc for 9 different authors in an anthology, plus some illustrations. So it was quite a project to tackle for my first indie one, but I'm very grateful we did it. We've had 3 of the authors who were in the collection who have passed now, and we've preserved their stories through that book. So been very grateful. And since then, I've just continued to research, and I do a pretty deep dive into the research. I like to tell people I'm very heavy on the fiction, but I'm very heavy on the history. So with my historical fiction, I really like to portray the real events and all of our characters, and just preserve the legacy of my ancestors, my Choctaw ancestors, the faith that brought them across our Trail of Tears, and rebuilding the nation in what's now the state of Oklahoma. I live in Texas, but I do go to Oklahoma quite a bit. So I always like to people think I'm from Oklahoma, but we do spend a lot of time there. So that's a bit about what got me going. Honestly, though, whenever I was 23 and I had been doing a lot of entrepreneurial stuff. I'd been doing a lot of writing things, and this was before the NMAI program, and I just had kind of a breakdown, like a mini crisis, and I just wiped everything off the board of my life, all the things I was doing, all the things I thought people wanted me doing, and I just wiped it clean. And I walked into a Barnes & Noble about 7 months later, and I was just drawn over to the magazine rack, and I picked up a copy of Writer's Digest, and it was just like in that moment, God told me that's what I was to do. That's what I was to do with my life, was to be a writer. And that's what I've latched on to. And it's been a wonderful 16 years now, I guess, experience, and 16, almost, this will be going into my 17th year of really pursuing writing as a career and as the calling in my life. So that's where I'm at with a lot of that. That's kind of my journey, my early story.
I love that. And what a journey to find your calling and find your love of writing. And also props to you for formatting an ebook in Word using HTML, because that is a beast.
Now, I didn't format the ebook in Word. I formatted it and then converted it with Calibri. Like, I literally built it out with HTML text in, I can't even remember what I did. It might have been like a plain note text kind of thing. It was an insane beast. I was ready to burn everything down.
No, that's pure hell.
Yeah, I've only had to format an ebook from scratch once for university and never again. So that kind of leads me to my next question, because
we have Vellum now. We have Vellum. It's all
exactly.
Good.
Indie publishing has changed so much. So I'm kind of curious, like, how you have found the changes in indie publishing throughout your career, and what are some of the big ones that you've seen?
Oh, I think the ease of it, for sure. Like, whenever, and I say the ease, like, as indie publishers, we still our books need to look as good as if they were traditionally published. And so I spent months studying book design and how, what are the elements of a book, and a blank page is a blank page. You don't have running headers and numbers on them, and ebooks need to, not have all this wonky stuff. Like, it needs to look as good as a traditionally published book. So that was always my thing from the very beginning. It's just now, once you've learned those things, the tools that we have now to actually be able to do them is incredible. Like, I almost cried the first time I used Vellum to format my books. I was like, I was done in like 30 minutes, and that was the print book and the ebook. And I was just sitting there like, what do I do with my life now? Like, I'm done. This did not take me 2 weeks to do the ebook and then a month to do the paperback. So I would say the tools definitely, but man, where we're at now this year and all of the things that are going on with AI, like, I am just barely scratching the surface. And I know it's a hugely controversial topic. Like, we don't have to go into it, but boy, is that changing things, and just really future casting and thinking about where we're going from here. I still can't wrap my mind around it, but I'm very grateful for the tools that we have, and we just need to steward them wisely.
And this episode is not sponsored by Vellum, but I will reach out to the Brads and let them know that we are heavily bigging them up. But I'm glad to hear that's your experience, that the tools have been greatly improved. And maybe a cheeky question, but as a user of Kobo Writing Life, I'm wondering if you could tell us about your experience using our platform.
I love using Kobo Writing Life, especially the promos that y'all offer. Like, when we can jump in and do a promo, and it's so easy to join them. Like, honestly, like, when I go on there, I'm like, okay, I've got to find everything. And it's just like right there. And it's it's a very user-friendly interface. And I would say a lot of the platforms are, but I just like the sleekness of Kobo. It looks like it belongs in the 21st century. It's not something from like back in the 1990s. So, or even the early, mid 2000s, like where we're at there, whenever I started. So the modern interface, I really like that. And it's just easy to use. It's easy to update my books when I need to, because every time a new book comes out, I've got to go through the whole gamut of updating everything and re-uploading the files and putting the links for the new books and all of those things. And it's user friendly. And I really appreciate that, because we do a lot of behind the scenes work as indie authors. And when it's easy to use the tools like that with Kobo, I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And as the person who's putting all of those promos on that promo tab, thank you especially for shouting those out. I appreciate it.
Very valuable for indie authors. Any kind of promo we can get, we take.
Now, you have mentioned already about your use of dictation when writing your books. And so I really am excited to dig into this, because I find the ability to dictate your story so fascinating. So I'm curious, before we dig into the how of it all, I'm curious what drew you to dictating in the first place. Like, what was your kind of aha moment that this could really be a game changer for you in your writing?
Oh, man. I'm trying to think of when I very first heard about dictation. I made my first attempt at dictation, like really attempting it, in 2013. So way back. In 2013, prior to that, I had heard about authors dictating. Like they would get we had the dictaphone, had dictaphones, but then we had the electric digital recorders, and you could get those and record your words into it, pop it into Dragon, which back then, Dragon, you bought the actual CD-ROMs and loaded it onto your computer. Like it was a little bit of a process, and it was pretty pricey software. But I can remember distinctly, being like in an office, Max Office Depot, and, looking at the softwares and seeing Dragon. I'm like, oh, it's like, $700-800 price tag, whatever it was then. And I was like, I'd really like to invest in that. Like, this sounds amazing. Authors are writing, doubling their writing speed and all of this crazy stuff. And I was like, that sounds amazing. I want to be able to do that. And I really need to be able to do it if I want to build a sustainable fiction writing career. And so I was like, I want to do that. But can I really justify investing that? And I don't even know if I will be capable of doing it. Like, can I speak my words of fiction? What does that even look like? What does that sound like? What is that experience? How is that different from typing my stories? And so I was very hesitant about it. I had already written a couple of novels at that point. I hadn't published my first book, but I had written novels I'd, been writing for many years. And I was like, oh, I can't justify doing that just yet. So in 2013, I got my first smartphone. And one of the first apps that I downloaded was Dragon Anywhere. I just downloaded a trial version of it because I was so antsy to try dictation for the first time. I was like, I want to see what this is like. So I downloaded Dragon Anywhere, started it, and got a few sentences out. I posted on social media. I was like, I dictated, and this could be epic. And it was an epic failure. Like, I could not make the transition mentally and I was still having tech issues with that app. So I couldn't make the transition though from typing to speaking. I was like, okay, I tried it. I really wanted to try it, and I got to try it, and I learned something. I learned that my brain is not wired that way. So these authors that I was hearing on podcasts that were being able to dictate their stories, they're wired that way. That's a special gift that they have in their brains. They can get words of fiction to come out of their mouth, and I'm just not one of those authors. So I was really convinced of that. And over the years, I would continue. Every once in a while, an author would come up on a podcast and they would be talking about dictating their fiction. I'm like, I've got to give it another try. So I would, and I would fail. This went on for 7 years until finally in 2020, early 2020, I set myself down and I was like, I learned how to type. And it wasn't just something that just happened. Like, I had learned how to type and I got better at it, just like handwriting. And then I went to typing and I was like, I'm going to just practice. I'm going to practice dictation. And so I started practicing it with doing morning pages. So I was handwriting my morning pages and I'm like, oh, this just takes so long, which phenomenal habit for writers, morning pages and handwriting them. The best way is the best way to go. But I was like, what if I dictate it? What if I just give this a shot? And I had a voice record app on my phone that would transcribe it inside the app. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. So I started dictating my morning pages, and was probably a couple of months later, and I even posted about it on social media again. I was telling people like, here's how I'm training myself to dictate. And a couple of months later, I was going into the kitchen, and I had to head out for an appointment in about 20 minutes, but I had a sink full of dishes. I was like, okay, I'm going to get these dishes before I leave because I don't like to leave dirty dishes in the sink. So I was like, I'm going to knock these out right quick. As soon as I crossed the threshold into the kitchen, like an entire scene downloaded into my brain. And it was a backstory scene for the novel that I was working on. And I was like, there it is, the whole thing. Like I had the opening sentence, the middle, the dialogue, the closing, and it was perfect. I mean, as perfect as it ever is in our head, right? And I was like, okay, I need to capture this, but I also need to get these dishes done. And I've only got 20 minutes. And because I was such an experienced writer at that point, I knew that type of scene would take me about an hour to type up. And I was like, I don't have an hour. One, the best I could do is run in there to my computer, try to capture a few notes that would hopefully jog my memory enough that I would be able to write it. And even at that, I was like, who are you kidding? Even if you have notes, you're not going to be able to recapture the scene. And I thought, I've been practicing this dictation thing for a while. So why not? Why not just give it a try? I hadn't done any fiction up to that point, and I was like, why not just give it a try? So I grabbed my earbuds when had the little mic hanging off of the cord, and which I don't really recommend because it can rub on your clothes. But the big thing is for authors getting started with dictation, just start with what you have. Like just start with what you have, and then you can get better. You can get better setup and all. So that's what I did. I plugged in my earbuds. I started the record app on my phone, dropped my phone in my pocket, and started doing the dishes while I was speaking this scene, this backstory scene. So I finished that up, stopped the recording, headed out the door, came back, had the app transcribe the words, and I had written nearly 1,500 words of fiction in that backstory. And I was blown away because one, that would have been a scene that I would not have captured at all otherwise. And two, I did it while I was doing the dishes. And three, I was like, whatever I need to make the full transition from typing to speaking my fiction, I need to do it because this is incredibly powerful. And this is what I need to build a sustainable fiction writing career. So I continue dictating, and I've dictated 14 books now. 11 of them are published, but I've dictated 14 books now, plus numerous, newsletters, blog posts, and all of that. So that was my journey in getting to dictation. It was not a smooth path, and that's why I try to teach authors how to do it, because there is a method that you can actually learn and train yourself, even if you feel like, oh, my brain just doesn't work that way. I tried and failed with dictation before, and it's just not for me. So I really want to reach those authors, that let them know that, yes, you can make that shift from typing to speaking your fiction.
That seems like such a valuable way to capture like instances of when you have those aha moments that, like you said, you wouldn't have necessarily had the time to write down. Because I can imagine, working in a creative field, it doesn't mean when you sit in front of your computer that it's actually going to come out of you. Your flow isn't a tap like your sink of dishes. But it's great to see that you can have the dictation as a sort of a means of capturing that while you're doing other things.
Mm-hmm. Very much in the moment.
Yeah. For authors who are completely new, what would you say? I know you're saying start with what you have, but how could they get started? And what do you think are a common misconception? I'll have to from my example would be are you including all the grammar, comma, period? How does that work in the dictation piece?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Such great questions. There are a lot of misconceptions, but a lot of authors, they're like, I mentioned dragon. They think, I've got to spend all of this money on dragon. I never used dragon, and not to knock dragon in any way. A lot of authors still use it, but I never used dragon beyond that trial version on my phone back in 2013. So I never went on to purchase dragon or anything. I just used the built-in speech to text on my iPhone. So everyone, if you have a smartphone or a computer, you have what you need to start dictating now. And that's why I say start with what you have. You can upgrade later if you want to get a mic, if you want to use other software and all, you can do that. But you can literally just activate your built-in onboard speech to text, whether it's on your iPhone, Android, MacBook, PC. It doesn't matter. If you have one of those devices, you can start dictating now. I will say, though, with the misconception, a lot of authors think, okay, well, I've got my text set up. I've gotten over that hurdle. I'm good to go. I'll just activate it and start speaking, and all the words are going to flow out just like they do at the keyboard. Not that they always just flow out at the keyboard. Like you said, it is a bit of a process, but a lot of authors like, okay, I've got the scene. I'm going to just start speaking it. And they activate their dictation function, open their mouth, and nothing comes out. So I really teach authors like before you even do that, because that will just let your brain know like, oh, hey, this isn't for me, and start creating those blocks. And like, don't even start until you get some training, until you train yourself to do dictation, because it can create those blocks. But that said, you can get started with just what you have. On your question, Tara, with as far as like punctuation and all, I teach authors to speak their punctuation. That was something I trained myself because my record app, it did not auto punctuate. And so I taught myself to say new line, period, open quote, close quote, exclamation point. And so new line. So I would speak my punctuation. The tools now, most of them have auto punctuate. So a lot of authors are leaning into that, and they're just speaking their stream of words and letting the tool put in auto punctuate. There are also tools, AI tools, that you can drop your transcribed words into. You want to make sure that you're very careful with that it doesn't change your actual words, but it will put in then your punctuation for you. So there are tools and options these days, but I'm still at this point advocating for authors to train themselves to speak their punctuation. One of the reasons for that, I think, especially for fiction authors, is punctuation is a big part of our voice, like our author voice and our style. And we use punctuation a bit differently. We'll bend the grammar rules a lot of times when we're doing a story. So that is very much a part of our style and our writing voice. So that's one of the reasons why I encourage, especially fiction authors, to go ahead and train yourself to speak your punctuation. And it is as natural to me now as hitting the shift key or the return key on my keyboard. It is, I've trained my brain to speak that without having to think about it.
I have so many questions about this. Mostly because I think I am somebody who does not believe my brain can be trained to do this, because I leave voice notes for my friends all the time, and I start on one topic, and by the time that 6 minutes is done, we're on a completely different story. So Tara's looking disgusted that I leave 6 minute voice notes.
6 minutes.
Sometimes they're broken
I try to
up
keep
into
mine
sections.
under 10 minutes. So.
But I'm really curious how the writing process works. Like when it comes to storytelling, we hear a lot about plotters and pantsers. And you mentioned that you do a lot of research when you are writing your books. So I'm so curious how the writing process looks while you are dictating. Do you have notes that you refer to? Are you pantsing while you're speaking? I'm so curious.
I love that because I have authors, they're like, and some authors who have, shared about dictating, they're like, you have to have an outline. I have pantsters, seat of the pants writers that do my training. I have a fellow author that when she started out writing fiction, she started out with dictating, and she has only dictated all of her books, and she is a pantster. Like, she just is a complete discovery writer. That's what she does. So that myth of that you have to have an outline to dictate, not true. I will say an outline overall helps in my whole writing process. Like, it has helped so much since I've moved into outlining, because I used to be a seat of the pants writer, and I still am. I still am a discovery writer, but I'm what we call a plantster. So a mix between a plotter and a seat of the pants writer. So a pantster, boy, I always get tangled up in these words, but a plantster is in between that. So I do have a bit of an outline, but I'm still very much discovering as I get into the scene and all. I'll just have one paragraph describing that scene, and then I'll get into it, just kind of some general ideas and all basic plot things. And so with dictating, as far as the actual process, because like I said, get into rambling, and it's like it turns into what happens for a lot of authors when they start, quote, dictating their stories is it's more story notes. So they're more brainstorming, or even if they set out to write the scene, it turns out to just be an elaborate outline, and they're not actually writing dialogue. They're not writing beats. They're just talking about that scene. And they're like, well, then he's going to walk over to the door and step outside and wave, at the neighbors, rather than, John walked to the door, opened it, stepped onto the porch, waved at the neighbors. It's like, it's more of a description of what's going on versus the actual scene. When I say I dictate, I am writing the actual scene. So it looks just like whenever I type my stories, like on the page, like it's going to look, I'm forming my sentences just like I would if I was typing. So there are several things to get to that point, and a lot of it is the training, it is the practice, and then it is doing your same routine and your same process as if you were typing. You're just speaking it now. So if you have, like, I dictate into Scrivener on my phone. Unfortunately, it's only iPhone. So I do use Scrivener a lot, and I use it, just dictate directly into my Scrivener app. But what I will do whenever I have my, so if I'm doing that, a lot of times I'll have my outline on my iPad. So I'll have that there so that whenever I'm dictating, my phone is occupied with that. I'll have my outline notes on my iPad so that I can reference it, because I can't hold all of that stuff in my head. I can't hold it all, what I'm going to do that entire scene. And the other thing to remember is, as you're going along in the scene, it's okay to pause. Just like whenever you're typing a story, it's not that we have this idea with dictation that as soon as we activate that, we have to start talking and never stop and just keep going all the way to the end of the scene, and we've got to go really fast because we're dictating, and that's the whole point, is we've got to go fast. And you don't. You totally don't need to do that with dictation. You can just slow yourself down. I speak slower than what I'm talking right now whenever I'm dictating my fiction. Like, I take my time and I will pause. I will take 5 minutes and go, let me kind of review what I had in this other scene. Let me look at my outline. Let me look ahead, make sure I'm still going in the right direction, because I had, the characters did something unexpected. And I'm like, do I allow you to do that or not? And do I try to back things up? So I will just stop and I will go back and I will review my outline. I will just sit there and think for a while and just kind of ruminate on the scene of, is this really the direction I want to go? So same process of when you're typing. So it's the same thing. I would pause and think about things and go back and look at my outline. So whatever your process is, whether you're an outliner, a plotter, or you're a pantster, or you're a plantster, you can use that same process with dictation and just give yourself permission to take your time and pause that dictation function. It is not your master now that you are doing that. Like, you're mastering dictation, and it's totally okay to pause that and take breaks and reassess where you're at with your scene. So really valuable, I think, whenever it's like, how do I actually get it to the point where I'm writing a scene? That's one of the ways that you can do it.
Has it been helpful for writing dialogue? And secondary question, do you put voices on when you're dictating? Maybe that's a silly question, but maybe sometimes hearing the dialogue out loud actually helps improve the writing of the dialogue. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it absolutely does. We never write verbatim dialogue, not on the nose dialogue, but it can really help with that natural sounding dialogue. And yes, one time I caught myself, most of the time I'm very oblivious to my voice whenever I'm dictating, because I have done it so much and I've trained myself, and I just get lost in my story world once I start writing by dictation. But I did kind of come out of that briefly whenever I was doing one of my Western characters, young cowboy, and I realized I was taking on his accent and like literally speaking the way he would, the way I hear it in my head of his voice, not to an extreme degree. You want to be careful with accents, because you do want to enunciate your words. You want to, have your cleanup process be as minimal as possible, but you can slip into a bit of accents, a little bit of role playing. So authors, your hands free. So we're like acting out sword fights. Like, there's things that you can do literally while you are speaking your words. And it's so fun. It really is. But yes, dialogue, it can come out more natural sounding. And I've also heard audiobook narrators say that they love to narrate a book that was dictated, because overall, not just the dialogue, but everything sounds more comfortable and more natural in the audiobook that they're speaking. And of course, you still go through the editing process, you go through the revisions, but that initial first draft that you laid down and the way you constructed most of your sentences are going to make it through to that audiobook process. So audiobook narrators love that. And we always talk about, reading our work out loud, and all really helps us to hear those clunky, convoluted sentences and all. And if you're speaking those, a lot of times that you'll kind of hit the curve on that and not have those sentences even go into your story. And if they do, it's fine. You can edit them. And I'll even say, open bracket, delete that, close bracket. And I'll rewrite that sentence right then, because when it came out of my mouth, I was like, that did not sound right. Like, I got a better way I can do this. For the most part, though, I am a fast draft writer. I like to get to the end of that first draft and then do my revisions. But occasionally that will come up. But you can definitely have, I think, better sounding, more natural connecting sentences whenever you're dictating versus typing.
I'm imagining like a full theatrical cast going on with an author, moving around their apartment, like really getting into the scenes.
Absolutely. I have done that a few times.
I never really thought about the benefit of dictating a fight scene, because you're already up. So you can move and be like, okay, if he's throwing his left arm, then this guy's going to go this way. Like, you can actually act out the fight while you're dictating it rather than sitting down, typing out some words. Wait, where is he going to land? Stand back up, do it again. That's really interesting.
And, I do most of my dictating while I'm sitting. So I do like to sit in my big comfy chair. A lot of authors do it when they're out walking. There's no rules to it. But yeah, I have put my phone like up on the mantle. So, cause I didn't want to be encumbered by even a cord, with a mic or whatever. So I'll just put it on the mantle and I'll like be acting out, some of the scene. And then I'm speaking it as I'm doing that. And yeah, even facial expressions, you're just like, you're in that talking about dialogue, you're in that conversation. I'll be like, it's like, would you really do that? Or would you do that? Or like, what am I actually doing with my face? And that works into the scene. So yeah, it's so fun when you get into that part of it.
You've kind of alluded to editing a couple of times. And I know that there is a concern from authors when it comes to dictating about the editing process and what it looks like after. So I'm curious if you can share your workflow for turning that dictated, like raw text into a polished manuscript. Are there specific tools you use, techniques that you've mastered?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a whole section in my course talking about what I call the cleanup process. And I distinguish that from the editing process. So I am an advocate for messy first drafts. Like get through that first draft, get it written, and then you go back and you do your revisions, you do your editing process. With dictation, you kind of have a mess on top of the messy first draft, right? Like you have a little bit of extra mess if it didn't quite transcribe right, or maybe you stumbled over your speaking or you got interrupted. And so you've got a little bit extra mess there. And that's what I call the cleanup process. So the goal with that is to get it just looking as good as if you had typed it. So it's not editing. You can do a light edit. Occasionally I would fall into that. But for the most part, it is a speed read through that. One, I like to reread what I just wrote. Like I did that even with typing. And so with that, I'm just correcting some really glaring issues that I'm like, ooh, that did not transcribe right, like a character name or a word. And so let me just fix that right quick. So I would always do that on my computer, much faster than on my phone. So I was like, cleanup process, get it synced with your computer, go ahead and do that there. And on that, yes, that does keep a lot of authors from dictating. It almost kept me from that. That first scene of fiction that I wrote, where it got almost 1,500 words, I was like, wow, this is incredible that I did that in like little over 20 minutes or so. And typing, my average typing speed, 1,500 words an hour, like a fiction, like that's my average typing speed. With dictation, I do average about 3,000 words an hour. And again, that's not speaking fast. That's not speaking nearly as fast as what I am right now. I've hit up to 4,000 words an hour with dictating. And I could be even faster if I really was intentional about it, have my outline, all the things. So, but I averaged 3,000 words an hour with dictating. When I did that first scene, I was like, wow, 1,500 words in, like half that time, this is incredible. I got in there to do the cleanup or the editing on it, and it took me almost 30 minutes to clean it up. And I'm like, ooh, if 30 minutes, like I'm still at my 1,500 words an hour. So what's the point? Like it, just created this mess that now I have to clean up. So one of the things on that is it was still worth it because I would not have captured that scene at all because I had to leave for my appointment. Two, I wasn't at my desk doing it. So I talk a lot about health with dictation and the benefits of it. Most authors are coming to me because of health rather than writing faster for being able to do dictation. They're like, if I can't dictate, I'm not going to be able to continue writing books. Like I have to master this. So health, biggie. I wasn't sitting at my desktop doing that. And then three, what I found is the cleanup process, the dictation process got cleaner and the dictation process got cleaner and the cleanup got faster. So I was able to, I've gotten better. I got better with my dictation. And so it wasn't such a mess when it came out. Still a messy first draft. Like I don't write clean first drafts at all, but it was much cleaner in terms of the sentence structure and all of that and not as many mistakes. And then the cleanup process got faster because I trained myself. Like this is an edit. This is not an edit. I am just going through and cleaning up these words. So that's what I trained my authors to build that into their writing session. So if you typically write for 1 hour a day, leave yourself 10 minutes or 20 minutes. When you're first getting started, it may be 20 or 30 minutes, but now it's just like 5 or 10 minutes for me for a writing session. It's about 90-10. So if I spend 55 minutes dictating, it only takes me about 5 or 10 minutes to clean that up. So build that into your writing session. Do it immediately after, because what you don't want is you don't want to get to the end of that first draft and have a whole 90,000 words of uncleaned up words. So I had an author do that. And that's when he quit dictation. He was like, that is a nightmare. I'm never doing that again. So I always encourage authors, do your cleanup right after or as soon as you can after your dictation session. So then finally, what a lot of my authors are doing, they have created prompts and everything, and they are dropping it into an AI, different AI programs to do that cleanup for them. So not only punctuation, or even if they are speaking their punctuation, they are still using AI to drop their words into, and it just cleans it up, does not rewrite it, but it will just clean up those errors, especially with like character names and all. So there are even tools from whenever I started dictating that's making it easier. I'm not currently taking advantage of those. I'm doing my cleanup manually still, but it's something that I'm definitely exploring too. So that's the cleanup process versus editing, and that's what I teach authors. It does get better with time, so don't let the mess of dictation scare you.
I totally would never have thought to clean it up per session, and would have been that 90,000, oh, well, I'm throwing my computer out the window now because this is terrible. That's really good advice.
Yeah.
Now, I want to switch gears a little bit. I feel like I can talk to you about dictation all day because I am so fascinated, but we don't have all day, unfortunately. So I do want to switch gears a little bit to talk about another really important topic, which is writing Native American and Indigenous characters. So you have a course, Fiction Writing American Indians, which aims to equip authors to write authentic stories. And I'm curious what authenticity really means in this context and why it's so crucial for authors to get it right.
Ooh, right. Let's dive into the hard questions. I love it. So, and I could talk dictation all day long. I could talk writing Native American characters all day long too. It's definitely one of my passions, and I love teaching it. And I think authenticity, it is a word that gets thrown around a lot these days, right? Like it's in it. What does that actually mean? And I think when it comes to writing Native American characters, I'd have to put at the top of the list, biggest issues is stereotypes, especially in North America, because we think we know what authentic Native culture looks like, and it is quite different a lot of times. And what a lot of authors, so whether you're writing fantasy and so you're basing it on a Native culture, or you're writing contemporary romance, or you're writing historical fiction, like all of these, the different genres, a lot of times people have one image of what a Native American looks like, and they really go into their story with that. And so with authenticity, it is not really just being authentic to, quote, Native America, but authentic to the actual tribe that you're writing about. And so that's where I really drill down to what tribe are you writing about? Who is it that you're representing? What are their surroundings? Like if you're writing fantasy and you want to base it on, quote, Native American, well, what region? Is it Northwestern? Is it Northeastern? Is it, Native Hawaiians, Native Alaskans? Is it Plains Indians? Is it, people think about Choctaws and they, think teepees and buckskins. And yeah, we had buckskins, but we never lived in teepees. We had what we call chokas and summer houses and winter houses. And we were largely agrarian, and we were also hunters. So it's like, to be authentic, you want to drill down into the specific tribe and then to the specific individual that you're writing about, because in Indian country, like, everybody is different. Everybody has a different perspective on things. They have different life ways that they've adopted, like they have the general, but then they have the specific things that make them an individual. And I think really drilling all the way down to that is how you can create authentic characters in your stories. And that's really what I see that we're going for with writing Native characters.
For an author who's committed to being respectful and having an accurate representation of Indigenous characters, where would you suggest that they begin their research? And do you have any sort of ethical considerations that they should keep in mind?
Big question.
Another large question. We're just throwing the easy ones at you.
Let's do it. Like I said, this is what I'm here for. And I also let authors know that you can ask any questions that you are concerned or offensive or anything like that, because I'm somebody that you can ask. I'm not easily offended, and I just want to educate. I want to be that bridge, because I've stood in both worlds as an author, that I want to have all of these characters and all these experiences in my stories, and also as American Indian background of how many things have been taken from our cultures and all by writers, honestly. So I want to be that bridge. So feel free to ask any of the questions. So with as far as approaching research, one of the things, again, you want to determine the specific tribe that you're writing about. And once you do that, you have a starting place. I will say, let me back that up though. There is the 30,000 foot view. So you have a 30,000 foot view, and then you kind of come down to the ground level, and they call it the worm's eye view. So you do want to get that 30,000 foot view. And you can do that through, we have what we term Pan American Indian culture and stuff. So it's where a lot of our people, especially in the mid 20th century and later 20th century, we had lost so many things that there was a coming together of Native people and just kind of grabbing everything that was left, and it very much got spread throughout all of the different tribes. So you'll have similarities like fry bread and Indian powwows that you'll find in all American Indian cultures. So you can start in places like that, just learning about what, a generalization of American Indians and reading some books on, kind of American Indians and North Americans. There's North American Indians. There's a great book called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. That is just a really comprehensive overview. But remember, it's just an overview. But that is a place that you can start with 30,000 foot view. And then once you narrow down the tribe that you're writing about, which for historical fiction authors, it's a bit easier because it's whatever region that they're writing in. They know the tribes of that region. But if you're writing fantasy or contemporary and you're just like, I just want Native American, you still want to drill down to a specific tribe. So once you have that determined, for resources, a lot of times you can go to the tribes themselves. I will say that with just a prerequisite that not all tribal people are open to sharing their culture. And even if they work within the tribe, even if they're in historic preservation or they're in the language department or they're in the culture department, they're not really up for just sharing this with anyone. They really want to know, who you are, what you're wanting to use it for. Because again, authors have come in with, hey, I want to write about your people. And they would take things and they would misuse them at all. So, and just continue to perpetuate stereotypes. So I found that even within my own tribe, I had to build relationships with key people before, I could really talk to them about what I was doing. So there's a process to that, but there are a lot of public things depending on the tribe that you're writing about. There are books about them written maybe by the tribe or their website. Sometimes there's a cultural center or a museum in the area. So really looking for the sources that were put out by the tribe itself as much as possible. That's not always available. I know with like the Omaha people, they're a very small tribe. I actually just got to visit with them a couple of weeks ago. I got to go to the Omaha Indian Reservation. Great experience. We connected with an elder and she drove around with us. We drove around in our minivan and she took us down to the Missouri River and, to some of the spots that outsiders really, wouldn't be allowed to go to. So we were able to do that. So making those connections, that is kind of a next level thing, but you can get there. You can become a trusted author of Native fiction and or Native characters in your fiction. It's going to take a bit of a process. But as far as places to start with that 30,000 foot view, get some general knowledge and history of American Indian culture in North America. I'm speaking specifically about North America, but any indigenous cultures around the world, like start with that 30,000 foot view. And then for the worm's eye view, try to find connections within the tribe itself and see what resources they have and start there.
That's great advice. I'm sure as well, having some research sort of completed and asking specific questions might be helpful when you are trying to dive into like that very specific point of view. I'm wondering if you have any, I guess maybe just a little bit of your thought process around, like, as you were saying off the top that you did a lot of research into that anthology, but decided to go like the historical fiction route versus like the nonfiction. I'm just curious about that decision because like the amount of research that you're doing is the same, but the writing is very different.
Yeah, absolutely. The amount of research is the same. So that we'll talk about that anthology. I did decide to do it as fiction because fiction, that's where I reach the mainstream. That is a lot of people, of course they do read nonfiction, people who are more like into that specific history topic, but fiction, you're hitting a whole different audience. And really we learn through entertainment, honestly, like we learn through stories. And so my early mantra then was educate through entertainment. And I wanted to be able to reach a mainstream audience that otherwise wouldn't have picked up a book just about the Choctaw Trail of Tears. They're like, okay, that's interesting. Read the back cover. Oh, okay, I've got the history and put it down. Versus if they picked up, an anthology that is told from the viewpoint of a Choctaw pony and from a little boy who's, crossing the Mississippi River when it's at flood stage. And so they're more drawn to the stories and the human experiences. And really that's what we want to share is our shared, it's our shared history, but it's our shared experiences as humans. So we all had mothers, we all have fathers, we all have tragedies and triumphs and victories in life. And that's what I wanted to be able to bring out and really connect with readers and make them feel a part of the story. And like so many of them have shared with me, they're like, why didn't I learn this in school? I didn't learn this in school. So it is historical fiction, but they're learning through these stories.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, and for that I apologize. But I'm curious if there's a story that you've read in the historical fiction realm or outside, or even a TV show or a movie that really connected with you and helped you become the storyteller that you are today.
Oh, man. There are some good examples in mainstream books and movies. For the most part, they fall a little short for me. I'm going to be honest. You did put me on the spot. So there are some, but I would say my earliest experiences that had the most impact on me was going to, we called it the Five Tribe Story Conference in Muskogee. And that was a gathering of Native artists and literary book writers, storytellers, and filmmakers. So I will say that there wasn't a specific piece of media that impacted me, like from a specific author there. But that event overall, I think I went to it for like 3 or 5 years. And it was a gathering of those who were putting out these books and putting out that. And that had the single most impact on me, I would say, for the types of stories that I tell and the way that I present our history and culture is learning I was like, oh, I wouldn't tell a story like that. And then also I would also learn from them. I was like, oh, wow, I am holding on to that. And so that I would say probably had the most impact on me as far as taking in other media, books and movies for Native characters.
Now, just looking kind of big picture at all of the really cool things we chatted about today, looking at like dictation and author representation. And I'm curious if you have any advice for an author who is a seasoned author who kind of has their routine down pat, but they're feeling a little stuck in their current writing habits, or they're hesitant to tackle sensitive cultural topics in their work. Is there any advice you would have for those authors?
Yeah. So on the dictation side, if, I have authors that they've written 150 plus books, indie authors who've written 150 plus books who are making that shift to dictating. And I love that. So it's definitely for experienced authors, and it can really help you get out of being stuck. So if you are feeling stuck as an experienced author, facing that burnout. I've heard so many authors talk about burnout lately. And so if you're facing that, dictation really does give you that new medium, that new way of getting your stories out, and in a more effortless way. Once you have trained yourself to do it, it is more effortless. And on, writing Native characters, what was your second part of the question, Rachel?
I'm just curious if you have any advice for authors who want to include, whether it's Indigenous characters or tackling other culturally sensitive topics, like if you have any advice for them to kind of get over the hesitancy.
Yes. And I'm sorry that I was bringing that in with experienced authors. I think for experienced authors who are, like, oh, do I include Native characters? I think it's the fear. It's the fear of, one, getting it wrong. Like every author that I talk to, they are not like, I'm an author, I can write whatever I want. Like they are very respectful about it. It's more the fear of getting it wrong. They're like, I don't want to cause more harm. Like I want to do this right. And so I feel that. And that's why I created the course, Fiction Writing American Indians, because I want to help alleviate that fear of, take these steps, get this training, and then you can rest assured that you are doing it right. And I think the other thing is just the risk. There is a lot of risk when you're writing Native American characters. I say a lot of risk. There can be that element, or even that perceived element of, oh, I'm going to be criticized for it. I'm going to get slayed on social media. Like it's going to be just, my career is going to go up in smokes. And I think that's especially for an experienced writer. They have a track record. They have, all of these books published. This may be even their full-time income. And it can feel like you're putting it all on the line to tackle something that is so, it's so polarizing, and it can be so, just feel so controversial and so dangerous to your career as a writer. And so I just, again, encourage authors to get the education and training and approach it with the right heart, and do include American Indian stories. One elder said, we don't want to be left out a lot of times, a lot of them are like, yeah, don't touch my culture. Like you'll get different opinions. But if we're leaving out Native American characters or any character that's, not us, that not our own experiences, it's just not a true representation. And then those experiences are being eradicated. They're being left out of the stories. They're being left out of the narrative. So I do encourage authors to do it right, do it well, and please do it.
I like the connection potentially between like historically oral storytelling traditions with your dictation. It's really like
Yes.
kind of special. Like
it really is. And that's the thing on dictation. We've been telling stories for thousands of years. We were telling stories. Most of us were telling them before we could write. And so it really is going back to our storytelling roots, and very much so with Choctaws. That's how we passed on our stories, was oral storytelling. So definitely don't want to lose that. And I feel like I'm getting to carry on a bit of that by doing dictation.
I love that. Well, we'll wrap up now. I could keep talking to you all day, but just curious if you have advice for authors. Another sort of general large question, but is there like one overarching piece of advice for authors to feel more confident and empowered on their unique journey, as everyone's journey as a writer is sort of different, but is there any piece of advice that you think would be helpful?
Write what you love. I know there's a lot of trends, and it's good, to write genre fiction and churn out as many books as you can and to make a living with it. But just don't lose your art in that, still write the books that you've been called to write. And that's what I've always tried to do. I spent 2 years on my book, A Numpa Warrior, The Choctaw Code Talkers of World War I. And that was 2 years that I could have put out a lot of other books, but it was the one that was on my heart and the one that I knew I needed to get done. And that would be my advice for seasoned authors and authors just getting started. Is there is that element of, we want to make a living with our fiction, with publishing on platforms like Kobo, but don't lose your art. Don't lose your calling in that.
I think that's wonderful advice. And before we let you go, what are you working on next? What do you have coming up?
Oh, I love that. So I have the next 3 books, or the last 3 books in my Doc Beck Western series is already written. So I will be editing and getting those published, and that will finish that series. And I'm currently working on book 6 in my Choctaw Tribune series. And that's a novel. The other books are novellas, so they go a little faster. But this is a novel, and it's one that I have ruminated on for about 5 years. So I'm really excited to finally have the pieces coming together to get it written and get it to my readers who have been very patiently waiting for the last book in this series.
And for listeners who want to find your books or who want to learn more about the dictation courses you have, or writing more, or who want to learn more about writing Indigenous characters, where can listeners find you?
Yeah, fictioncourses.com/American Indians is where you can go download a free copy of my ebook called 5 Stereotypes to Avoid When Writing About Native Americans. It's a short but really packed, and I think authors have really taken a lot out of it. It's just poignant. It's got some very key points on the stereotypes, and then how you can overcome those as an author. And then if you go to fictioncourses.com/dictation, you can download my free quick start guide for getting started with your dictation. And then my books are available on all major retail platforms, including Kobo. You can just search for my name, Sarah with an H, Elisabeth with an S, not a Z, and Sawyer, Sawyer, like Tom Sawyer. So I have to spell out my whole name, but there it is. That's my author name. And you can find any of my 19 books on those platforms. Oh, and also you can find those on ChoctawSpirit.com. That's the shared artist website that I have with my mother.
Nice. Thanks so much for chatting with us today. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Tara, Rachel. I appreciate y'all having me on. And we don't have a word for goodbye in Choctaw. We say Chipisalachiki. I will see you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're interested in Sarah Elisabeth's books, we will include links in our show notes. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps us. You can let us know, and you can do this however you are listening to the podcast. And if you are looking for tips on growing your self-publishing business, you can find us on socials. We are at Kobo Writing Life on Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads.
This episode was hosted by Tara Kremen and Rachel Wharton, with production by Terrence Abrahams. Editing is provided by Kelly Robotham. Our theme music is composed by Tearjerker, and a huge thanks to Sarah Elisabeth Sawyer for being our guest. If you're ready to start your publishing journey, sign up today at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing.